All right, welcome to a 3 steps to sketch look at graphing basic cosine graphs. In this video, we're going to graph y equals -4 cosine of x over 2. So jumping right in, we have our outlined method on the left. We'll find our essential information, get everything set up. Second, we will plot our key points in our pattern. With cosine, we know the original one is maximum 0, minimum 0, and we'll talk about how that changes just a little bit here, but it should be very sensible in how it changes. And then step 3, we'll sketch a cycle and then repeat for as many as we would like. So remember that this method works for unshifted cosine graphs, so those are in the form a cosine bx. All right. And let's jump in. So we see very clearly our A is -4. Okay, and A helps us find our amplitude. Amplitude's the distance from midline to a maximum point or midline to a minimum point. So of course, if we were asked the amplitude, you wouldn't say -4. Since it's a distance, we would just take the absolute value of A. Our amplitude here will be 4. Okay, but our value A is -4. And B, we can see is a little bit hidden. If you need to rewrite this equation, you can rewrite it, of course, -4 cosine. But if you want to bring that 1/2 coefficient of the x out, you can do that. So you can clearly see that B is 1/2. So do that if it helps you. All right, remember B tells us how many cycles happen between 0 and 2 pi. So in this case, for this equation, we'll have half of a cycle happening between 0 and 2 pi. Okay, B also helps us find the period. So to find the period of cosine, you simply need to take 2 pi and divide by B. So 2 pi divided by 1/2. Okay, that's like 2 pi times 2 over 1. Our period is 4 pi. Okay, that's just the length of a horizontal cycle. And that should really make sense with what we said B is. If half a cycle happens between 0 and 2 pi, it follows that a full cycle happens in 4 pi. All right, the final thing we want to get set up here, we have to choose what value we want for our scale labels. So here we'll say, okay, horizontal scale labels could be anything, but let's make it easy on ourselves. Let's take the period and divide by 4. And this is looking ahead. We know that our pattern is going to have 4 key points, and so this will ensure they align nicely with our horizontal tick marks. So 4 pi divided by 4, we'll be counting by pi on the horizontal axis. And for the vertical axis, you can really do one of two things. You can use 1, that's completely fine, or you can look to A and use whatever that value is, of course, the absolute value of it. So in this case, I think I'm going to use 1 just because it'll really show that amplitude. All right, so let's go ahead and label. So we're counting by pi for the horizontal axis, so that's 1 pi, 2 pi, 3 pi, 4 pi, you could keep going if you wanted, and we'll do the same in the negative direction. All right, and then let's count by 1. So 1, 2, 3, 4 will be at the top of our grid here. -1, -2, -3, -4. Okay, so we've done the hard part, we've done the analysis, we have all our essential information. Now it's really down to key points in a pattern for step 2 and sketching out our cycle and getting as many as we'd like. Okay, so one thing I want to note here as we move into step 2 and we're going to plot some key points, it's really important to notice this negative sign out front. Sometimes as soon as I see that, we'll just circle it because it's a good reminder, hey, this is going to be a reflected cosine graph. So instead of following the original pattern, it'll just follow a reflection of that. So I'm already expecting what I would term an upside down cosine function. Okay, but you can still use the method. It works just as well. Okay, we know we're just going to have minimum 0, maximum 0. And I think that's really helpful to identify from the beginning, as big of a reminder as you can give yourself. That way you don't forget. Okay, so we are expecting a minimum, and we know our first point should be set on the y-axis, and we just look at A to tell us where that should be. So our y-coordinate, or our y-intercept here, will be -4, because that's the value of A. So let's plot 0, -4. Okay, we know that's our minimum. So at our next horizontal tick mark to the right, we'll have a 0. Moving another tick mark to the right, we know we should have a maximum. And the y-coordinate for this will just be the opposite value of a, so it'll happen at positive 4. All right, and then the final point will be another 0 at our third tick mark to the right. Okay, if you'd like, we know we're about to sketch, you can go ahead and set the final point, or it'll be the first point of a new cycle. I think that just helps for sketching purposes. All right, but we have our pattern here. So we have our cosine key points, and now we can sketch step 3. Okay, so we're sketching in an upside down, make that look a little nicer, an upside down cosine graph. Okay, again, it's due to that vertical reflection, so it reflected the original cosine graph over the x-axis. All right, and we can repeat. So let's sketch one more cycle. Okay, let's move over to the negative side of the horizontal axis. So starting at negative 4 pi, okay, we know we have 4 pieces of the pattern, so we need 4 tick marks open. We'll have minimum, 0, maximum, 0, repeat, and that links in nicely to our current green cycle. So we'll have cosine curve coming in like this. Okay, if you want, you can put arrows to show it continues. You can do that on the other side too. All right, so this is 2 cycles of our graph, our equation y equals negative 4 cosine x over 2. And one last thing to note, let's go back to B. Remember B, we said told us how many cycles should happen between 0 and 2 pi. So let's zero in on that. If you look at the graph between 0 and 2 pi, you see that that's half of the green cycle of cosine. So B equaling 1/2, everything checks out. We feel confident that this is a good sketch of our given equation.